more emphasis on 義 over 利。礼よりも義を重んじた。そういう意味ですね。オーバーリーじゃないですね。
In the analects, you
ですね。
get a certain amount of emphasis on the details of the procedures in appropriate ritual. Mencius tended to focus more on the inner person, and in general, I would say that's a kind of tendency that one can see if you want to make a comparison between Confucius that emerges from the Analects and the way Mencius articulates Confucius' idea.
だから要するにあれですよね。
In other words, if he's emphasizing ye, what he's
彼はだから講師はね、礼を重んじたけども、メンシャスはエンファス義を重んじた。正しい行いですね。義っていうのは。彼女そう言ってるけど、さっきも冒頭で説明しましたけどね、義と礼とどう違うんだっていうところありますけど、ちょっと僕もよくわかんないね。
He's emphasizing is the way of externalizing.
だから way of external benevolence。だから仁を外に出すやり方。例えば彼女義と言ってるんだろう。義と正しい行い。礼というのは相手に出す思いやりですから、仁、ベネボレンス、仁をその外に出していくやり方。というのは礼なんですよね。
Benevolence. If benevolence is viewed as a translation of Ren, we come very
蓮は仁義の仁ですね。
very closely to Mencius's idea of what Ren is about. Confucius sometimes used the word Ren so that it seemed like the general core of being a good person, being an exemplary person. And in specific
exemplary 模範的なperson.
cases, he might be talking about benevolence, but on the whole, it was almost similar to exemplary.
exemplary 立派な。
With Mencius, the focus is much more on benevolence.
だからメンシャスはmuch more focus on much more on benevolence.
Kindness, acting compassionately. This notion of li for
notion のこれ義のこと言ってるんですよね。
Mencius was also a kind of inner sense of good manners. So again, he takes a little bit more of the emphasis away from the external practices.
もっとその外部のプラクティスですね。強調した。だから義を強調したわけですよね。
And more on the interior person, you might say.
More interior person, you might say. Interior person って仁ですね。正しい思いやりよりもエクスターナルプラクティスだから正しい行いの方を強調したんですね。
The reason he's sometimes called idealistic is because his views about human nature were rather optimistic, especially given the
孟子ですからね、これはね。人間はもうちょっとね、楽観主義的だ。
time and place that he lived. Warfare is all over the place, but nevertheless, Mencius believed that human nature is basically good. Now here Mencius is continuing to challenge the Moas.
これね、わかんないですね。challenge the Moas。このね、何回見てもわかんない。
Now here Mencius is continuing to challenge the Moas.
Continuing to challenge the Moas. わかんないですね。モアスって彼女言ってるの。何ですかね。中国語だと思うんですけどね。モアス。何ですかね。
I mentioned Mozart briefly last time. Mozart's view was that we need to understand human motivation in order to organize society.
Human motivation 人間の動機ですね。
Well, and his idea was what we really ought to try to encourage is universal love, treating people
Universal love ですね。
essentially the same. So his programs would be much more designed to get away from ritual and get away
from ritual 礼よりも離れる
from anything that's going to make you focus on those close to you to a more general conception of social welfare, you might say. Oddly enough, though, he
これさっき言ったオードリー・ナイフという妙なことにですね、
was proposing universal love, which might sound rather pie in the sky.
サウンド・ラダ・パイン・スカイ、むしろ絵に描いた餅のように聞こ
He
える。
also believed in sanctions.
彼はまたあとサンクション、制裁ですね。
He was oddly a very much a law and order sort of person.
ロー・アンド・オーダー、ソート・パーソン、ロー・アンド・オーダーっていう規律ですね。法律と規律。オードリー、妙なことには very much a law and order sort of person.
And even had a kind of military unit
Kind of military unit himself.
himself. He thought these weren't really conflicting.
He thought these were not really conflicting. 彼はこういったような、例えば、人間がもっとね、善だということと、一つはもう一つ、ルール&オーダーみたいな人のことを、例えば、彼は強調してるんだけど、彼自身は he thought these この二つのこと、not really conflicting してない。
Because as Mozart saw it, most of he thought these weren't really conflicting, because as Mozart saw it,
これは孟子のこと言ってるんですね。これメンズのことを。モーセスって言ってるの孟子が好き。
most of the time people do have the desire to get what they want. And this is going to be a problem when people want the same things and can't all have them.
これだから誰もがそのやりたいことを求めているっていうことを彼女は孟子もそうだって言ってるんですよね。
So his idea was, if you just sort of look at human desires, what they basically
人間の欲望ですよね。
are motivated by, they have some
動機です、モチベーテッド。
desires, they fear certain things, and these are the kind of ways to organize society. Mencius didn't agree
メンシャスですね。
with much that Mozart said.
Didn't agree with much that Mencius didn't agree with much. モーセス生徒ってなんだ。モーセスって誰か。
モンセス。
だってその前がだってリンチスなんだっけ。
Mencius didn't
メンシャスでしょ。これメンシャスって言ってあげる。メンシャス孟子でしょ。メンシャス。
agree with much that Mozart said.
でそのモーセスはメンシャスじゃないよね。
うん。
誰だかわかんないですよ、これ。モーセス。誰だ。
And one of the things he certainly disagrees with is the idea that what we ought to do is tap into human beings' desires and fears in order to figure out how to organize humanity. Mencius believed that human beings inherently had the wherewithal
本来ね。これはウェアウィザーはさっき言ったあれですよ。手段とかお金とか財源で持ってるもの。
to develop virtue.
To develop virtue 徳ですね。本質的な徳の素質を持っ
In
てる。
fact, he argues that we have motives aside from the sort of selfish motives that Mozart seemed to think were primarily important. Crucially, human beings have a faculty
なんだろうな、この人も。春図ではない。
called Shen.
シェンって生まれるっていう字を書くんですよね。シェン。
Shen is translated heart and mind.
ハートの前に、ここ、シェン。シェンってこれ生まれる。シェン。
Where these are not considered to be two different things, but one. You might consider it a sort of feeling intelligence or emotional intelligence at the same time as thinking intelligence all going together. These aren't divided in the Chinese language. And according to Mencius, the fact that human beings have this ability means that unlike animals, they have a lot more
だから もうさっき言った春秋と違ってね、unlike animals, they have a lot more
control of how they respond to these other kind of motivations they have.
モチベーションと動機ですね。
Moreover, we're all born, as he views it, with the seeds of goodness.
With the seeds of goodness ですね。
Mencius, in the book called Mencius, describes what he means by this.
ここで彼女はです、紙持ち出してきて何言ったかっていうと、井戸の話ですね。
Mencius said, suppose a man were, all of a sudden, to see a young child on the verge of falling into a well. He would certainly be moved by compassion, not because he wanted to get in the good graces of the parents.
グレイスは慈愛心とかね、あれですね、行為、
Nor because he wished to win
愛情ですね。
the praise of his fellow villagers or friends, nor yet because he disliked the cry of the child. From this it can be seen that whoever is devoid of the heart of compassion
devoid は欠けている。Whoever is devoid of heart of compassion。コンパッションって思いやりだったかな。コンパッション。慈愛、慈悲の心を欠けている。
Passion is not human.
is not human ですね。
The heart of compassion is the germ of benevolence.
ジアンってさっき言ったですね、芽生えですね。ベネボレンス、人の芽生え。
The heart of shame, of dutifulness. The heart of
dutifulness は忠実。
courtesy and modesty, of observance of
モデスティは謙虚ですね。
the rights.
オブザーバンス、これはオブザーバンスの守るってことですね。権利を守る。
The heart of right and wrong, of wisdom. Man has these four germs just as he has four
フォージャームス、さっき言った4つの、あれですね。これです。短所、4つの短所、フォージャームス。ジャームっていうのは意味は、芽生えですね。短所、フォーリムス、4つ、リムは体の手足ですね。
limbs. When these are fully developed, he can take under his protection the whole realm within the four seas. But if he fails to develop them, he will not even be able to serve his parents. Now, a lot's packed into that story. But what Mencius is proposing, first of all, is let's just imagine a situation where you see a young child about to get into a position of real danger. He thinks it's natural anyone would feel moved to intervene. And although it may well be that this will win commendation or win
commendation。これは褒章とか、賞賛とか、commendation。
the admiration of the parents. And maybe
要するに、褒章とかアデミレーションのペアレントを求めないで、本能的に人間と行動するでしょと彼女言ってるんですよね。
that this will win commendation or win the admiration of the parents. And may even be that the person doesn't like to hear the screams of a child who is on the verge of falling into a well. Nevertheless, those aren't the important thing. What moves him is really this spirit of compassion. And this is
慈愛、コンパッション、慈愛、思いやり。
something that is instinctive in us.
インスティンクティブ、本能的ですね。
Mencius talks about these four seeds of goodness.
Four seeds of goodness。これはさっき言った4つの視点のことですね。
And some of them we've talked about already. For example, Ren is one of them.
仁義ですね。
Which we can translate as benevolence. Yi is another one.
義ですね。
Ritual propriety or Li is another one.
Propriety。理って言ってるんですね。
And he adds to this list wisdom or Ji.
これはG って言ってるけど、これは知ですね。知。
Now, it might seem kind of odd to say, well, these are already tendencies within us. I mean, certainly we aren't born already knowing rituals, so it would be hard to say that we're fully proper in a ritual sense at birth. And that's not what Mencius is saying. Instead, he's saying that these four virtues actually build from something that's fundamental within us in the first place.
もう本来ね、こいつの基本的なものを人間
That
持っ
we
てる
have natural tendencies that are fulfilled when we develop these full virtues. So it's not reasonable to say, as Moza does, that people are mainly motivated by fear and desires that are very selfish. Instead, we have other motives stemming from the fact that we have the heart-mind. And as a result of that, these motives make goodness a kind of natural thing. So we have native moral tendencies, you might say.
生まれながらの道徳的な傾向テンデンシーですね。
And he does acknowledge that they're germs or seeds. They
ジャーンって芽生えですね。種。
aren't something that just automatically are going to come to fruition.
カウントフルイッション、実を結ぶですね。フルイッション。
It's absolutely essential that they be cultivated. So, like Confucius, he thinks cultivation, education, all
カルティベーション、修士ですよね。
these things are very important. Learning the code of your society in terms of
コードビューを支えた社会の規範。
ritual forms, learning how to use words in a way that really communicates. All of these things are essential for someone to grow up as a mature member of the moral community. But there's already a disposition in us that is
これはその、ディスポジションとさっきの性質、気質、性格。
directed in the right direction. So one doesn't
もともとね、ライトディレクションになるようなディスポジションの性質、気質を持っている人間はね。
need to view moral development as
One does not need to view moral development.
Moza does as something that basically has to be controlled by means of external force. People don't have to be forced to be good.
People don't have to force to be good.
One has to cultivate tendencies that they already have from the beginning. In fact, he goes so far as to say that anyone could be a sage.
Anyone could be sage, 賢人ですね。
Not meaning that anyone at any moment suddenly might turn out to be a sage, but that with proper cultivation,
With proper cultivation. まあ、正しいね、修習をすればね、そういうものが賢くなると。
anyone, no matter where they start, can develop sagacity, the ability to
探して賢明
to
さで
really
すね。
see fully into the world around them. And this again depends on these germs.
芽生えね。
So what society ought to do is make sure to cultivate these things. But by nature, our tendency is working in the right direction. Now, as I mentioned, many people found this a rather optimistic view. At the time that Mencius was teaching, a lot of people were desensitized by the sorts of things that had
Desensitize っていうのは、これはあれですね、人の感覚を鈍らせる。Desensitize by sort of things
been
that
happening, just in terms of general unrest and instability. These things continued actually beyond Mencius' time. It was a rather long period of confusion and turbulence in China. And the thinker who represents what's often viewed as a kind of opposing school, Xunzi,